So I'm halfway through Folktale Week, and if you haven't heard of Folktale Week, it's an Instagram challenge that encourages you to dive into a collection of 7 prompts released daily and respond to them visually. And what you get to see internationally is all sorts of illustrations that speak to both the tradition of folktale, but also lots that have a contemporary twist on it as well. And I thought it would be really good practice for me to do this. One, because it's sequential. One panel feeds into the next panel, feeds into the next panel, and I could do with that sort of practice before I get back to Cambridge. Now, I'm hoping to rejoin Cambridge at the end of January next year, all being well with a mammogram that's coming up next week. If that's all clear, then we're good to go and back on track and back to working on that Masters for Children's picture book illustration. So I thought this would get me into the vibe of it, and I've seen it year on year on year on year, and every year I get a bit of FOMO thinking, oh, I should have done it, I should have given it a go, and every year I tell myself that I don't have time. This year I found the time, and it's been a discovery, it's been a real gift actually, and I'm in the messy middle, and that's the bit I'm sharing with you. So I hope you don't mind that it's so messy and I'm still thinking this through, but I thought you would appreciate the sort of behind the scenes process. So in my sketchbook, I scribbled down the 7 prompts. So this year it's night, echo, rain, book, charm, storm, and dawn. And it's unusual this year because the first one and the last one, they kind of bookend each other, and already it's starting to feel a little bit narrative. So that is really helpful. I'm just going to shut my studio door. The cat has been in and out, so the door's open a little bit, but she's settled down on a chair, so I think we can keep that cold air out. So I've got this collection of prompts, and the idea is that at the beginning of this week you release night on Monday, echo on Tuesday, and so on. And you can take it in whichever way, form, shape you'd like to. You might think of each one of these things as a literal sense, a representational sense. You could be quite abstract. You could think of them as a place or a character or action. And I really wanted to do another concertina. As you might know, that next year's project with Wind in the Willows is going to be a concertina, and I absolutely love the challenge of blending one panel into the next. So, talking about the concertina, I have fallen into the trap before when I've got carried away with the story and carried away with the art making that I've not given due consideration to the format. So it was really important to me that I nailed this to begin with. And also it's a bit of an odd number, 7 a day for each of the week. So I was just thinking how that might fold out, and is concertina the best way forward? And I had a pretty set idea to begin with. I had it all planned out panel by panel, and it was kind of about a dream catcher running across rooftops and into a bookshop and back out again, causing chaos, and then everything's calm in the morning. And the story, I'm sure there was more to it at the beginning when I first, when you first have an idea and you think, oh yeah, that's it. But I'm not kidding, your first ideas are generally the worst ideas. And it's a bit like peeling an onion. You've got to peel back the layers to get to the real nub of the story, the real truth of what you're trying to say. And even if you don't know what it is, this at least is a starting point, and that is useful. So I thought I would start the painting and let the materials have their own ideas, which I'll come back to in a second. But my next consideration after format, the story, or what I thought was the story, to how the colour palette might change as you travel through the story. So colour, as you know, has a really emotional connection to us, and it can really enhance the narrative of a story. So I had a whole journey going from cool lilacs to oranges to blues to peaches. And then ages ago, I treated myself, you might have seen this on social media, this Fumi opaque set. It's watercolour, and unusually for watercolour, it has some opacity about it. The colours are desaturated dream. They're beautiful. Quite plasticky though. And I'm not kidding, this tray of colours took months to get to me, and it doesn't actually give you a lot of paint. I'm already down to the base of this, and I haven't done a lot at all. So I don't think it's the most effective way of buying and making paint, but as a little project and to have a go with them, but maybe also consider that I like these desaturated colours, so how might I make them up myself in the future? That might be useful. So anyway, I used that. And of those colours, I started to try and echo the different emotions as the story happened. And in doing so, as I've worked through this week, it's changed as this has changed. But it's a starting point, and I really think that's important to sort of, the message is important to get across to you, that it doesn't matter that you've got it all in the bag when you're starting, and you can give yourself the permission to change your mind, because very often your work will develop and inform better ideas. So along with that, I knew I wanted to work with ink and bleach, and I didn't know how the ink would go over these paints. And this is a black ink and a blue ink, and the spatter across is ink, is bleach, and this is bleach as well. And I decided the bleach was rubbish for drawing with. I've been drawing with this very thin needle dispenser, which is an absolute pain, as you've seen before, to get its top back on. It takes me ages. And it can be a bit blobby, so, and you try and control it and it doesn't give you the best results. Whereas put in a bit of bleach and water, I've got a 50-50 mix here, and giving a light spray, you get a variated effect, and that's much more my kind of thing. So I was making notes to myself as I was going along as to what this might be useful for. And I then started to think, well, actually, what if the materials could inform how I do this? And I've got a time lapse that I'll just put over now, and it's of me realising, first of all, I can see a dragon in the bloom of ink. If I just pull this out, as this ink was building and layering, I could see a dragon initially, and that was the first indicator to me that this could be something other than the dream catcher that I was thinking of. I didn't necessarily want to go down the dragon route, and then I thought, well, hold on a minute. Earlier, I was considering that maybe night and dawn could be a character. And so that resulted in me popping in almost like the spirit of the night. And I used a reference of Edinburgh rooftops for this, and really enjoyed the repetition, the pattern, and just playing with the different values that were coming up on the ink using ink and water, and very light swooshes with the inky brush, which at the time probably felt really brave, because you get to a stage where you're really happy with what you've drawn, and then you know you need to take another risk, and this was probably one of those risks at one point. So day one, night, was just that, and day two was echo, and I was trying to think how echo might relate to night, and if I could bring in some moths that could almost act as like an echo, one because of their repeating form as they travel through the sky, two, just thinking about the beat of their wings and how that might be a soft, gentle echo. And moths and folklore seem quite well intertwined, so it was suiting the nature of the story. So this was wholly unexpected 2 days in. Then I'll hold it out this way. Then came the bookshop, and this is where it gets a bit tricky with the concertina, because you've committed to a certain style 2 panels in, and yet you need to change the angle, the focus, the point of view, and make it feel like a different beat. So each panel has its own beat, and together it sings a song all the way through. Now if it sang the same song, if it was this kind of effect all the way through, it would just look like a pretty picture. However, if it had a different beat on different panels, you could have the opportunity to have suspense, jeopardy, drama, quiet moments. You have the opportunity to manipulate the emotional journey that people are going on as they read the story. Now, on this one, this is where I'd finished the pieces digitally. So I was working in the studio, and I'd probably have, say, an hour to do a panel, and then get on with some commissions that are in the studio. And then in the evening, up at the house in front of the fire, I'd work on my iPad, and I'd bring it to a more professional standard with the iPad. And this really helped me when it came to this one, because there was so much structure in this one, and windows full of books as well. I wanted to play with that digitally, but I was travelling that day on the train to Oxford. I was going to Pitt Rivers Museum, and on the train I just took my sketchbook and an ink pen. I started almost trying to sort of imagine a bookcase. I thought I did a couple of those, maybe I didn't. And that bookcase digitally then got superimposed onto this, and that started to inform the choices I was making. And suddenly there was a process that was becoming really useful to work in this way, and that was work initially in an analog way, with materials, letting them dictate the piece, letting them run free, letting them smudge and bleed into one another and create beautiful textures. Then go digital and start to structurally anchor a few points and really start to drive how the eye reads the piece. So from here on in, it became important just to do, say, an hour on analog, and then the rest on my iPad. this fella here, he came from when I was in Oxford. There was a girl who was sat on an armchair with her legs up, and she looked really cozy, and I thought, oh gosh, that's going to be so perfect. It feels very cozy, folktale-y, but it wasn't quite right. But I banked the idea anyway, and it was starting to feel a bit too obvious in terms of the perspective and the point of the angle I was taking people in on the picture frame as well. So another sketch, and this time it was an older lady, and here the moth and the girl show no relation to one another, no engagement, no emotion. So I think that's why that one got shelved pretty quickly. Thinking about connection and emotion, the moth on the nose of the older lady here worked much better, and I loved the book coming down here, but I knew there was more to it. So then sometimes when I draw a thumbnail and try and draw in the thumbnail, it really hinders me. So broke out of the thumbnail and just started sketching quite loosely. And I really liked playing with this gent. Nice character holding a moth with a book of advice under his arm. And then he developed even further by looking into a book with the moth on his finger. And then that, as you'll see digitally, I'll just overlay it just now, that became something of quite a magical scene. So I took this, I then inked him up a little bit. It was looking a bit static, and I knew that he needed background, but I wanted the background to match what had gone on here with the bookcase. So that digitally got overlaid. And then today, which is Thursday, I'm traveling again tomorrow, so I won't have much time to do this tomorrow, and I've got workshops on Sunday, so I knew I had to get ahead today. So when I went to Oxford, we went to Pitt Rivers, and I don't know if you've been to Pitt Rivers, but it's just this amazing place that you can go and gather inspiration. Sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming because there's so much, but even if you just take away a couple of ideas. So I was walking around feeling really frustrated that I didn't know what to draw, and I wasn't sure what I was collecting. I'd got this from the train, but not from reference. I sat and I was thinking, about our Wind in the Willows project, and there was a nice kind of still life setup which they'd presented with a badger and a fox and an owl. And then I found a cabinet full of little charms, and they were kind of moulded from wood or small pieces of ceramic or even bits of tin. And I just loved how simple their shapes were. And I thought, actually, that might... There were some little girls drawing and copying each other's answers. I couldn't help but sketch them quickly while I was there. But I love these little characters. So then they ended up in this cabinet of curiosities here. And this particular panel is charm. And this is where the bookkeeper will be looking around trying to find the right charm. And the charm that he needs is a teacup. And it causes a storm in a teacup, which then creates... The moth has faded at this point, but she comes back through the storm, and she comes back as dawn. So what we're seeing here is night turning into dawn, and obviously I've got to work on top of that. And the The technique that I really love, I hope I say this right, is called pareidolia, and it's letting the marks speak first. And it's a tendency we all have to see images or characters inside random shapes. So you know, when you look at clouds and you can see animals, or you look at ink splodges and you can see faces, that's pareidolia in the making. And if you let the ink blooms and pencil smudges and watermarks and paper textures make the characters, make the moth trails, make the moth textures. If you just have a look here, the textures on the moth, it's not a distinct pattern, it's a spray of bleach, and randomly pareidolia is doing the job for me. And it really helps elevate the mood of your work as well. But you've got to be brave enough to work in an abstract sense first of all, before you get too tight. And I think what's really interesting about this project, that it mixes both tight and representational and studies of actual things compared to an abstraction of things and mere suggestions. And it's almost like a representational drawing, so this would be representational. It can ground the magic in reality, and therefore the story becomes more believable, and you give the viewer something to hold on to, and it anchors the dreamlike parts in a real world. And there's a balance between intuitive mark making and recognizable form. And I think when you pull these two things together, it's exactly right for a folk story. So it's not about controlling the materials, it's about responding to them. Every bloom, every soft edge, every unexpected waterline becomes an invitation to a possibility of something. I couldn't have painted the fragility of that moth wing like that, but by letting the materials do what they do best, I've got the best results. And so this is kind of, is letting the marks evolve unexpectedly, and that means I had to let the story evolve unexpectedly as well. So there was me trying to be really organised and think ahead and plan ahead, but actually the gift has been in the discovery of what it's going to become every day, and I've so enjoyed that. So I'm not sure if I'll get this edited and up before I finish Folktale Week, or whether to hang on to this until I've finished it completely and I can show you the finished piece, which would make more sense. I'm just excited to show you, and I want to upload it already. And it would be wonderful if you gave yourself the opportunity to play with whatever materials you have and let them speak to you to create characters, stories, forms, patterns, something that is less controlled and more intuitive. So let me take you from the top, and I've saved it as a time lapse, and you can see the stages building, both of the analog and of the digital, and just sit back and relax and watch how it all unfolds.